So this video is going to be talking you through quite a variety of sources that are going to talk about the Battle of Actium and its presentation to the Romans, well, funny enough, after the battle. Also, just a quick warning, this video is going to contain some different splices from some videos I've made previously. So I apologise in advance for probably a change in slight sound, changes in background. The page numbers you will see when I'm looking at my source book in places won't match yours, so go by the source author. Also, the video won't entirely go through the order that's on the screen. It's because I recorded a bit last year and I shockingly didn't want to re-record it this year, so I've kind of nicked bits from different places. So just be warned that it might be a little bit of a hodgepodge, and for this I apologise. So there are some new authors for this section that are really important to do with the Battle of Actium. There's something called the ResGuest. Now, in your source book, the full name is the ResGuest Divi Augusti. You can call it for short the ResGuest, which I will always do. So the ResGuest is written by Augustus Octavian at the end of his life. It's published in public, so it's actually it was inscribed on his mausoleum after his death. Now, this means he can't lie. What he doesn't do is tell the whole truth. So what Augustus tends to do is, if it's something a bit difficult, he'll gloss over something. So he may not, for example, mention any names. So there's a bit of the ResGuest you're going to read where essentially he's talking about Antony, but he never mentions Antony's name. And he's doing this in order to remove Antony from the picture, to sort of, it's part of the propaganda, okay? Now, the last sections of the ResGuest are written after his death. So it's like a really weird moment where he talks about Tiberius, who is his stepson, taking over from him after I die, and he's obviously dead. It's just a very, very odd third person situation. We've got to keep in mind this is Augustus's view of events. This is like the version of history he wants to tell. There's some really good quotes in it. It's really, really easy to understand the ResGuest. It's not written in a particularly flamboyant way. There's lots of, I did this, then I did this, and then the people did this. It's one of the nicest sources in that respect. It's very quotable because it's very, very straightforward. So this video, for example, is not going to go through the ResGuest that I've set because it's incredibly straightforward. There are lots of archaeological sources that we'll be reading. We don't look at them as such in section B. Same for Augustus. Again, it tends to be a form of propaganda because it's often, if not always, built on behalf of or in honour of the emperor. So either the emperor said, I want this built in this place, or the provincial people have voted to build something in honour of the emperor. So we always got to keep in mind that, again, it is propaganda. We have Cassius Dio, who is my third least favourite source because he just takes forever to get to the point. He's not as bad as some of the ones you're going to read, not going to lie, but he's up there as some of the ones I personally really dislike this guy. But anyway, what's really helpful about Cassius Dio is he gives a senatorial view of events. So under Augustus, it's not massively an issue, but for later emperors, it's a real problem for us. He also writes much later than the period that we're looking at. He was born in I think it's 155 AD. So he's not contemporary in the slightest. He does understand the issue of emperors because he's writing under emperors, which is good. It's not like someone like Suetonius. He was writing under the emperors, but was writing about the Republic, so didn't really understand how the Republic properly worked. At least Cassius Dio has experience of the system. What he doesn't have is the experience of the system as it was being set up under Augustus. He is really, really well researched. He styled himself on Thucydides, but there are some really clear biases in his work. And there's key people he really likes, and there's a lot of them that he really does not like. When he gets going on someone he doesn't like, he's quite interesting to read. When he's kind of rambling on about people he likes, it's a little bit like, I don't know, pulling teeth. But that's my personal opinion. You might love him. Right, we also have for section A for Augustus some poets, Roman poetry. So there's a guy called Horace. Like I said, he's a poet. And importantly, he is patroned by a gentleman called Maecenas, who is a relative of Augustus. I think it's his nephew. the patronage is an issue because essentially he is being paid to write poems by someone who's part of Augustus's family. This means whatever he writes about is pure propaganda. On the plus side, Horace is really straightforward to read, and it's quite understandable. Although I'm going to talk you through the poem today that we're going to have a look at. I really like Horace. I think he's really fun. I think he's quite fun to read because you can actually kind of like, you can imagine the things he's writing about. But I'm not really much of a poet person, but I really like him. And he's contemporary, so he wrote at the time. So he's quite good at giving an official public view of the situation. Our other poet is Virgil. This is less easy to read, but we'll come on to that. So again, he's another poet. The poem we read sections of what's called the Aeneid, and it was commissioned directly by Augustus. So again, it's propaganda, okay? But again, it's contemporary. Now, supposedly the story goes that Virgil wrote the poem, and on his death, it was unfinished, and he declared in his will that he wanted it burned because it wasn't ready. It wasn't finished. It wasn't perfect. Augustus got hold of the poem, the unfinished poem, loved it so much that he published it anyway. So there you go. Right, so you need to find in your source books that poem because I'm going to talk you through the poem on my screen and talk through the key points that Horace is trying to make. It's not a particularly long poem, and like I said, it's a really straightforward one. So, welcome to Storytime with Kay. I'm going to highlight as we go through. So the first thing I would highlight is this line in here, which is one of my favourite lines in Roman poetry. So, come now, my boon companions, so my mates. Now's the time to drink, to dance, beating the earth with foot. So this is essentially celebration. People are dancing around. Everybody's really happy to deck the couches of a god. So they're giving gifts to the gods. This is like an amazing moment in time. Okay, for it was sacrilege before to draw up cabucan from, that's a type of wine, from ancestral cellars, while that queen was plotting demented ruin for the capital. So we've got Cleopatra is going to destroy Rome, and it's demented. She's insane. She's planning out empire's funeral rites. So she's going to destroy Rome. She's going to absolutely wreck it. This is the danger that Rome is now in. And now Horace is really going to lay into Cleopatra with a contaminated crew of men, diseased by vice. So not only are they dangerous, but they're dirty. You know, they're literally vermin. They are disgusting. This is what's waiting for Rome if they had won. Herself without restraint, in hoping what she fancied, drunk with fortune's Venus, blah, 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 blah. So drunk with fortune's sweetness, you could, maybe he's implying she's like quite literally in the drink. What she's really saying is that she is gunning for Rome. This is what she wants. She has no restraint. She's going to do it. Okay. In fact, it even says here, she's drunk on heroic wine, and she's going to attack everybody. However, thankfully, angels singing in the background. We have Caesar pursued her as she flew from Italy. Octavian Augustus is here to save the day, pressing on with his oars like a hawk. And then the same sort of thing goes on here. So against gentle doves, or a swift hunter against the hare in the snowy plains. So he is like the best hunter. He is going to stop this dangerous, scary, horrible creature. Even calls her a doom-laden monster. Okay. And Octavian's aim is to load with chains. So he's going to capture her. He's going to capture her and bring her back to Rome. However, seeking a nobler death, she doesn't want to be brought back to Rome. She did not in woman's fashion tremble at the sword. So she's not like an ordinary woman, which in Roman eyes is a really bad thing. Nor with her swiftly reach secret coast for safety. So she runs away. You know, she's not quite a coward, but she's not willing to be captured. So she dared to gaze with face serene on a fallen palace, so capture of Egypt, and bravely grasped savage serpents to drink their dark venom through her body's veins. So that's the infamous moment where she took an asp and the asp bit her and it killed her. So determined on death she grew fiercer, yet disdaining to be brought a queen no more, by harsh Liberian galleys to be paraded, no humble woman she, in a proud triumph. So it's believed that Octavian was desperate to capture Cleopatra and bring her back to Rome and quite literally chain her up and take her through the triumph. So remember, triumph is a massive procession with like the army and there's like flowers, it's all beautiful, and gold is thrown out to everybody. So he would have quite literally pulled her through the streets before having her executed. Notice who's getting the blame here all the way through. Ooh, and that's the end of the poem. Notice, as I was going to point out, who's not mentioned. There is absolutely no mention of Antony here. This is all Cleopatra's fault. This is what I mean about this propaganda about Actium. It's not what Octavian is trying to do is show that it's not a civil war. Okay, it's a foreign war. And the reason why he doesn't want it to be a civil war is because the late Republic, as we well know, was beset by lots and lots of different civil wars. Octavian or Augustus is trying to show that he's not like those really evil politicians, those bad politicians in the late Republic. He was saving Rome from a horrible foreign person. So that's why this poem is the way and is focused on the way that it is. Right, so now we're going to have a look at Virgil and Nate. I'm going to give you a bit of background for this poem because it's not a weird poem. I really like this poem, but it's a bit trickier. It's a bit more complicated, and you need to understand the history behind what's going on. Right, so the poem is based around the myth of a gentleman called Aeneas, who was a Trojan hero. Okay, Venus was his mother. Now, Venus is also claimed to be in the Julian bloodline. Remember, Octavian is part of the Julian bloodline. Now, according to the story of Aeneas, he travelled to Italy, where he became the ancestor to the Romans. Why is this important? Well, what the poem is trying to do is tie Rome to the legends of Troy. If there's anything you know about the ancient world, is that the Romans are obsessed with the ancient Greeks. They think they were classier, they thought they were clever, that they had beautiful architecture. That's why the Romans essentially copy all the gods. That's why they copy a lot of the buildings in the style. They want to be the ancient Greeks because they sort of looked at like Roman history and essentially saw it as full of death. Now, obviously, what the Romans were ignoring was like, I don't know, the Peloponnesian War, but they were obsessed with like particularly ancient Athens and how amazing they thought it was. So what they're trying to do is tie Rome to this fantastic legendary set of people. It also is glorifying traditional Roman values and virtues about bravery and sort of like being a good man and chastity and all these sorts of things. What they're also trying to do is legitimize the Julian Claudian dynasty as descendants of, well, Venus and also of Aeneas. So they're trying to sort of show that it's right that the emperors exist, or why Augustus is in the position that he is therefore in. Now, in terms of the poem itself, it's written as if it's the surface of a shield. So Aeneas had a shield with different layers on it. There was like a gold, silver, bronze, so on and so forth. Now, each of those ages represents a different age in Roman history. And the golden age is what they're working towards. And this will not surprise you, but Octavian, stroke Augustus, is going to bring about the golden age to Rome. So the late Republic was like a Bronze Age or whatever. It was like a really horrible, dirty age because everything was going wrong. The poem itself is describing the events and images shown on this shield. So it's a very descriptive poem. What Virgil also does, it's not an issue in this section we're going to have a look at, but in a later section he also changes the names of people and places to fit with this Trojan background. So that's something you need to be aware of, but so for this poem it's not really an issue. You're going to see what I mean about this kind of descriptive nature. So and I apologise as well, as I was highlighting my version, I clearly hadn't gone through and spell checked it. I think I must have voice typed it or something. So there's some very strange errors in your version that I've corrected on mine. So sorry about that. So between all of these, they run a representation of a broad expanse of swelling sea. So this is the sea outside Brundisium, i.e. Actium. Golden but dark blue beneath the white foam of the crest of the waves. All around it in a circle swam dolphins, picked out in silver, cleaving the sea and feathering its surface with their tails. So there's a lovely picture of what's going on. So he's now going to describe the battle. And you can see the bits I have highlighted. So in the middle were the bronze armoured fleets of the Battle of Actium. Cool, thanks for that. And there's a few kind of like metaphor-y things going on. It's going to get a bit English literature on you, and I apologise. So there before your eyes, the battle's drawn up with the whole of the headland of Laucus seething and all the waves gleaming in gold. So like the water's quite choppy, so that could show that everybody's kind of like, obviously there's a lot of anger, that this is like a really important moment in Roman history, etc. So on the one side was Augustus Caesar, aka Octavian, leading the men of Italy into battle alongside the Senate and the people of Rome, its gods of home and its great gods. So this is really important, a part of Octavian / Augustus's propaganda. So he's trying to portray himself as being supported by all of Rome, and not only all of Rome, so the Senate and the people, but also really importantly are the gods. So the gods are also on his side. So he stood on the poop of a ship, chuckles to itself by yourselves, which is basically the top of the ship, sort of overlooking the battle. On his radiant forehead, his gleaming forehead, they claimed the top of a flame with his father's star, so Julius Caesar's star, shone above his head. So remember, Julius Caesar, adopted father, been deified on earth, he's looking down on the battle, giving his blessing too. On the other wing, towering above the battle as he led his ships in line ahead, sailed Agrippa, with favouring winds and favouring gods. So all, Agrippa is also equally supported. The winds are on his side. The gods, are also on his side too. And he's got a naval crown on because he's basically the lead admiral. So you got all the Roman, the Senate, the people, Augustus, Agrippa on one side. On the other side, with the wealth of the barbarian world, in other words, Egypt, and warriors in all kinds of different armour. Like I said, some weird typos. Let me just sort that out because it's going to really bug me actually. Just murmuring to myself. There we go. Came Antony. This is the only poem that really mentions Antony by name. And with himself, and the power of the East. So you've got Egypt on his side. And the reason why this is particularly outrageous is not only has he got the barbarians supporting him, but bringing up the rear was the greatest outrage of all, his Egyptian wife. So Cleopatra was at the battle. This is quite a foreign concept, obviously, to the Romans. They don't expect women to be fighting. Cleopatra was a queen. You would expect her to be fighting. However, this is sort of double outrage for the Romans. So you've got all the gods on one side, and then you got sort of the barbarians and Antony in Egypt on the other side. And the metaphor continues. The whole surface of the sea was churned to foam. So it's a really lively battle. The water seems really angry. It's kind of like a really momentous. And basically it goes through and talks about how the waves are so high, they're like the size of mountains. It's obviously exaggerating. That the ships are massive, and this flying steel as fresh blood began to I'll highlight that. As the fresh blood began to redden the furrows of Neptune's fields. So it's a very bloody battle. Everybody's dying left, right and centre, which is charming. In the middle of all of this, the Queen, aka Cleopatra, summoned her warships. So she gives a signal, while Anubis barked, and all manner of monstrous gods levelled their weapons at Neptune and Venus and Minerva. So although we set up here that the gods were on the sides of the Romans, this is such a huge battle. This battle is so important that not only is there fighting on the water, but the gods themselves are fighting above them. So we've got Anubis on the side of the Egyptians, and obviously the Romans have got some of their most important gods. Obviously it's very significant that Venus is there. Like I said earlier, the Octavian and Julius Caesar, etc., claim to be linked to Venus. So she's obviously fighting on behalf of the family, if you like. Obviously Neptune's the son of the god of the sea, and Minerva does stuff. I'm not very good at Roman gods, sorry. You've also got Mars. He is also raging. So he's the god of war, obviously. I know that one. And the Furies have controlled fate, swoop from the sky. You've got Discord around as well. But importantly as well, hang on, sorry, my cat is just pawing at my wrist. There we go, goodbye Wilfred. Apollo is also taking part in this particular battle. So the gods are also fighting on behalf of Octavian because they want him to win in order to beat the threat of the East and to get rid of Antony and to bring peace. So obviously that's the poetry bits done, and like I said, I'm now skipping back through the source book because I've nicked that from another video and putting in extra sources. Like I said in lesson, this section of Suetonius we've already done. Okay, if I scroll up, blah 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 blah, see 28, 27, 26, it's the same thing. So basically this section is describing some of his actions while he was in the triumvirate, other actions including the proscriptions, etc., through to everybody hating him because he was an absolute pain in the backside. So everything you highlighted in the previous video, just either copy it across or just make a note to yourself that this is the same source that is in section B. So there you go. So I'm not going to bother going back through it again because, oh God, life's too short. So what we have is a short section of what's called the ResGuest. So just as a recap from the beginning of the video, remember this source is written by Augustus himself and gives his version of events. And he can't lie because it's published in public, but he's certainly going to gloss over certain issues or focus on other things. None of this is going to be his fault in terms of the war, and he's going to be just quite fabulous and amazing. So he says, in my 19th year, on my own initiative and at my own expense, I raised an army, kind of, and I set free the state. So this is really important in terms of the image he's trying to put across, that he is the saviour of Rome, which is oppressed by the domination of a faction. So that's the conspirators. For that reason, the Senate enrolled me in its order by laudatory resolutions. In other words, they praised him and raised him up, which should sound familiar. They gave me imperium, and then he was acting as propraetor. He orders me, together with the consuls, to take care lest any detriment befall the state. So in other words, I was told by the Senate, notice here, that I should save everybody. So that is exactly what I did. But not only that, the people made me consul in the same year. And when the consuls then died, they made me a triumvir. Well, kind of. The law was passed obviously for me in the second triumvirate, so he's not entirely wrong, but it's not quite what happened. I drove the men who slaughtered my father into exile with a legal order. Yeah, the second triumvirate was a legal thing. When they waged war on the state, I conquered them in 2 battles. So this is obviously a very different version of events from what we did in section B in terms of Octavian's motives and actions. So this is his version of what happened. Like I said, he's not technically lying. All this stuff did happen in this order. It's just not quite the way he is telling it. So there you go. We then go back to another section of Suetonius, helpful. So he jumps around like he tends to do, which is really frustrating. So we have the bit building up to the battle. So he broke off his friendship with Antony. He read out the will to the public, which we did in section B. Talks about the fact he was giving land to his kids with Cleopatra. The Senate then outlaws him, and then he defeats Antony in the Battle of Actium. So that's a really nice summary of basically the last couple of years of section B. Cool. Job done. Now, obviously, the way Augustus is going to write about his time is everything's going to be wonderful, but there are some issues that he faces, and there is one very early on, and he hears that his army is having a mutiny at Brundisium, and they'd mutiny because they demanded their pay and they wanted to be discharged. You know, some of these guys have been fighting for a really long time, initially under Julius Caesar and then under Octavian. So he has to deal with them. So he stays for nearly a month at Brundisium and he pacifies the mutiny. Does show that not everybody was necessarily very supportive of Octavian when he first came to power. He then besieges Alexandria, where Antony fled with Cleopatra and then captures it. Antony tries to create peace, but Augustus then forces him to commit suicide and then has to look at the body to make sure he's dead. And what he really wants to do is capture Cleopatra as what's called an ornament for his triumph. So basically he wants to put her in chains and kind of parade her through the streets to show that he had conquered Egypt, all the rest of it. to the point where he tried to have she killed herself by getting bitten by a poisonous snake, and he supposedly tries to get the poison sucked out from a wound, but obviously it doesn't work, and therefore they are then died. They are both then dead. They both died. He buries them together, which is lovely. How romantic. He has one of Antony's sons by his previous wife Fulvia killed, which is nice. He then has Caesarion, who was Julius Caesar's son from Cleopatra, also killed, which we mentioned in lesson. Everybody else, all of Cleopatra's children by Antony, he brings them up as members of his own household and treats them really nicely, which is lovely. He then has a bit of a weird story here, goes to the sarcophagus, looks at Alexander the Great, sort of looks and goes, why am I here? He's just a dead guy. So that's a fascinating story. Importantly, though, for Octavian is he turns the kingdom of Egypt into a Roman province. And Egypt is where there's lots of money, and there's lots of grain, and there's lots of food. So this is really important for the growth of the empire. And he starts some of his what we would call administrative or building works. It's a really important theme that we do in the section A. So he increases its fertility, i.e. the land's fertility, and yield for the Roman market. So he cleans out the irrigation channels of the Nile. So the Nile is obviously is surrounded by, it's quite marshy land, and basically what the Egyptians have done for millennia is dug these little channels out from the Nile to go into their land in order to grow crops, and these sort of irrigation channels have got clogged up, so he just cleans them out, which is very good, which means they can get more grain, which is helpful for the Romans. To perpetuate the glory of his victory at Actium, he founded a new city, giving its name Nicopolis, which we'll have a look at down here in a second. And he then makes arrangements for the celebration of games everywhere for 5 years. So everybody's celebratory, everyone's really happy. Isn't Octavian amazing? He has saved them from Egypt, and he has conquered Egypt at the same time. In that vein, we have then the victory monument celebrating Actium built in the city that he had created. Bits in brackets, remember we talked about this when we did section A for Greek, that they are bits that have been worn off and historians have added them in. So of Imperator Caesar, so Octavian, son of the deified Julius Caesar, having won a naval victory in the war, he waged on behalf of the state. So again, it's that kind of official line that he was acting on behalf of the Senate and the people to save Rome from a danger. And he set out to pursue the enemy as consul the 5th time, and he hailed Imperator 7 times, and he created peace. I'll highlight that, don't know why I didn't. So as a result of Actium, there is now peace across the Roman world, which is lovely. He then gets a triumphal arch set up in the Roman Forum. Remember, anyone who has won a great military victory gets one of these arches built to them, and this is his. So the Senate and the people of Rome set this up in honour of Imperator Caesar, so Octavian, and again the official line to commemorate the preservation of the state. So he has saved the state from destruction. You might be sitting and thinking, but hang on, isn't he the one who was marching on Rome and killing people? Yeah, he is, but he saved them from the Egyptians, so what else do you want? So then again, we have the next section of the ResGuest, talking us through a little bit more of his version of events. I often waged war, that is true, civil and foreign, on the earth and sea, in the whole wide world. An exaggeration of his military career. As victor, I spared all citizens who sought pardon, true. In terms of foreign nations, for those which I was able to safely forgive, I preferred to preserve than to destroy, also true. 500,000 Roman citizens were sworn to. So that kind of shows that everybody was really supportive of Augustus, according to Augustus. And he sort of sets up some colonies, and he returns to the cities, lovely. And then he signs some fields and gives out some money for their military service. Obviously skipping over the fact that there was a big mutiny at Brundisium, but he pays his soldiers. And then it talks about some of his honours that he is given. So twice I triumphed with the novation. 3 times I enjoyed a curule triumph. So he gets the ovations that obviously Crassus has had. That's nice. But he also gets 3 triumphs for the different aspects of the victory. So one is for like Egypt, and there's one for like Gaul, and there's one for somewhere else. 21 times I was named Imperator. That's throughout his entire career. The Senate decreed more triumphs for me, and I sat out from all of them. So he is turning things down. So he's also learnt from Julius Caesar's mistakes, and he does not just sort of accept everything that the Senate wants to give to him, understandably. I placed the laurel from the fasces in the Capitol. So he kind of places laurel, is a symbol of victory. So the fact that he's kind of giving it over to the Capitol shows that it's on behalf of Rome. So he's giving the victory back to Rome. I'm just trying to skim read through, blah, 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 blah. So the Senate wants to give him lots of sacrifices, which he accepts some and turns down others. Cool, fine. In my triumphs, kings and 9 kings of kings were led before my chariot. So again, him as a great military leader. In terms of the level of power, and this is going to be important for our next question in terms of whether he restored the Republic, he does admit that through his career, he was consul 13 times. Not all in one go. There's a massive gap between some of them, but it does show that he is not really acting very Republican. And also the fact that he had, by the time he was writing this, just before he died, he was tribune for 37 years, which is quite impressive. Okay, so then we have a coin. Now the coins for the emperors, just moving my laptop slightly, sorry, are much easier to use, there we go, than they are for the Republic, because they all get given little codes, so N31. Now you do not have to learn the codes. If you can remember the codes, good on you. N31, and there's another coin, one of the 2 I always remember. This is a fantastic coin for using to try and explain what Octavian was trying to say about his behaviour at this particular point. So obviously, really importantly, we have, I've upgraded my videos to this. Ooh, I can draw and everything. We've obviously got Augustus on one side of the coin. There we go, so it's a bit easier, which is mentioned here. Notice it talks about him being the divine son of Caesar. Sorry, Caesar Divi, so it's the divine son of the divine. So again, he's making that link to Julius Caesar always because he's a god. We also know that he's been consul for 7 times at this particular point of this coin being written. Now we have on here obviously the symbol of Egypt. You can see there's a lovely little crocodile. So we've got a croc symbolising Egypt, and you can see on the writing here Aegypto captor mentioned over here. So we have the fact that then Egypt has been captured. So this coin is suggesting the conquest, oh wow, can't spell Egypt, of Egypt. So why is this being particularly done? So this idea is to emphasize it's not a civil war, which we know it was, right? So remember, Octavian had been fighting against Antony. Cleopatra had been supporting Antony. What Octavian / Augustus is trying to do is show that it wasn't actually a civil war. What this Battle of Actium and everything else that he has done up until that point was all about was trying to protect Rome from Egypt, right? So he's trying to not erase history, but he's trying to package up the events in a more palatable way. He's trying to show that he himself was not like the people in the Republic, waging war on the state for his own power. He was doing what he did in order to save Rome from these really dangerous barbarians. So like I said, it's a really, really good coin. One for Battle of Actium. It's also good for Augustus's military prowess. It's one of his big claims. And it's a really good example of that Augustan propaganda. I'm going to jump past that poem because we've done it in the first half of this video. Like I said, I'd moved some stuff around to look at Cassius Dio's version of the events. So it's going to basically give you exactly the same information, but just give you a little bit more detail about some different aspects. So we have the battle, fine. And then when Octavian returns to Rome, not only did all the citizens offer sacrifice. So that's important. So again, we have the idea that the people, the public, the plebs, everybody was supportive of Octavian, and this is the image he's trying to get across. And then, in fact, even the consuls who were in office at this time come forward and offer sacrifices to him, which is quite politically significant. Sorry. So I can mention that. I don't know why I didn't highlight it. So the Senate's on his side, the consul is on his side, and this has never been done before, so he's the first to have this particular honour. After this, Octavian spoke in praise of his subordinates. It's not all his victories. His subordinates, i.e. Agrippa and others, conferred honours upon them as were his custom. To Agrippa, among other distinctions, he also presented a large blue flag, I'm sure he loved it, to commemorate his naval victory. To the soldiers, he gave other gifts. So he's very careful to make sure his soldiers are happy. The plebs were granted 400 sesterces each. That is a lot of money. So again, he's winning over the people. Octavian refused to accept from Italian cities the gold required to make the triumphal crowns they voted for him. Again, he's turning down really ostentatious, that's a good word, offerings from different towns and places. And he not only paid all the debts which he himself owed, as had already been explained. I'm going to unhighlight that because that's a really unexciting quote. But did not press others to pay their debts to him. So he pays off his debts, but doesn't force other people to repay their debts to him as well. Because of these concessions, the Romans forgot all the hardships they had suffered and accepted his triumph with pleasure. So one thing people always ask every year is, why did they accept Octavian? They'd spent all this time, they'd killed Julius Caesar, there'd been all these wars, they didn't like soul power and all this sort of stuff. Why accept Octavian? And a mixture of it is the propaganda from the poetry and the coinage and all the rest of it. But also, Octavian brings a lot of stability. He brings peace for the first time in a really long time. And he's giving out stuff that people want. He's giving them food and money and all the rest of it. You can't underestimate people just having a better life and how it helps them to forget what had actually happened. And Cassius Dio makes that point that I made with the coin, as though the enemies he had conquered had all been foreigners. And that is the great success of Octavian's propaganda, that he's able to manipulate the people into thinking, oh no, it wasn't Octavian waging war against another Roman. He wasn't fighting Mark Antony. What he was actually doing was fighting Cleopatra to save her, and he was saving us from her taking over. Now, as part of giving out all the money, there is an issue in terms of prices of goods increases. There's higher inflation, which could be obviously a bit of a problem for the economy. So there's a negative there. In his triumph, Octavian celebrated on his first day over the Pannonians and the Dalmatians, not the dogs, however you pronounce that, and their neighbours, and a number of Germans and Gauls. That's cool. Like I said, he has 3 different triumphs on each day. He does different things. He was able, none of those, I should point out, were done by him personally, but because he was Imperator, they all come under him. So he gets given the credit as a result of it, which is just Roman way of doing things. On the second day, the naval victory at Actium, and on the third, the subjugation of Egypt. So the triumphs for the different aspects of his military power. So this will be really good when we talk about Augustus's military success. You can use this section for that as well. And during the procession, he shows off the spoils of Egypt, obviously showing the great wealth that's going to come in from Egypt, which will obviously help the Roman economy quite dramatically. He has an effigy of Cleopatra carried, which is nice. He has their kids, which is not so nice. But remember, he treats them better after, so it's all good. After this came Octavian, who rode into the city behind the whole procession, showing that he is the Imperator. He played his part in all respects according to the usual customs, so he's not breaking Republican tradition in terms of that triumphal procession, except he allowed his fellow consul and the other magistrates, contrary to precedent, to follow him, together with the senators who taken part in the victory. So it's not just Octavian's victory, it is also everybody's victory. So he is saying, not just me, everybody works together to defeat Cleopatra and to save the Roman state, and I don't just take the glory here, it's a glory for all of us. So like I said, it's really clever propaganda that Octavian has put forward, and it's going to help secure his position with the Roman people.